Hospice physician and innovator B.J. Miller is our guest today to talk about end-of-life choices and trends in end-of-life care. You're connected with the Heart of Hospice. I'm Helen Bauer, here with Jerry Fenter.
Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, we're here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
Today's episode is sponsored by the Love Always Project. The team at Love Always understands that while loss is a natural part of life, it's a topic that a lot of people would rather just not think about. On the Love Always Project website, you'll find support related to grief, loss, and bereavement, as well as funeral pre-planning. With all the overwhelm that comes with the loss of someone you love, it's great to have the resources the Love Always Project provides. Check out their website at lovealwaysproject.org. This was a 4 or 5 hour conversation compressed into one interview.
It was. And you got to love the way that Dr. Miller, B.J. Miller, he said, just call me B.J. That's what I always kind of fall back onto. So we had the opportunity to just say, B.J., how are you doing today? But he had such a great way of looking at things and opened up in conversation with us. And you're right, we had this 4 or 5 hour conversation packed into just 1 hour. It was amazing.
It was. So Dr. B.J. Miller has practiced and taught in all major settings inside healthcare: home, hospital, clinic, and residential care facility. In his work, he draws on his personal experiences with his own disability and his undergraduate studies in art history as much as his medical education. He speaks internationally on the themes of living well in the face of illness and death. He's got a fantastic TED Talk. He is the co-author of A Beginner's Guide to the End that was published in 2019. He is also the co-founder of a company called Mental Health. This guy's just an amazing end-of-life advocate.
Yes, I really don't know where the end-of-life industry would be today if we didn't have B.J. Miller to do the kind of innovative thinking and just the thoughtfulness that he puts into the work that all of us do. So we're very grateful to B.J. Miller for what he has done to innovate the end-of-life industry.
So here's our conversation with Dr. B.J. Miller.
B.J., it is such an honor for us to have you on our podcast. Thank you for taking the time out to be with us today.
It is my pleasure. Good to see you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. So you graduated from Harvard in 2007, and then you became the executive director for Zen Hospice in 2011. What made you move into hospice and end-of-life care after only 4 years being in practice?
Well, it was really, so I graduated in 2007. That was the end of my hospice and palliative medicine fellowship. So I had graduated med school in 2001 and took a circuitous route. I was kind of on the fence of whether I really wanted to practice medicine. Like a lot of folks, you kind of go into medical training with a lot of idealism, and then there's the actual realities of practicing medicine. And those two things can be wildly different or importantly different. So I was bouncing over this line of whether I really wanted to do medicine. And I finally, I got exposed to hospice and palliative care as an intern in Milwaukee in 2003, 2002, something in there. And that's when that lit a fire for me. But even still, I wanted to really think about whether or not I had this in me. But at that time, the two things that really lit up for me, one was this sort of existential framework of trying to love reality. And if reality includes death, well, I got to love that too. That was an important sort of, for me personally, point of view. I was trying to do that in my own life. And then there was really it was more the thing that turned me on so much beyond that really was really the spirit of palliative care, which is irrespective of your prognosis. What is it that, how do humans handle when they bump up against things they can't control or they can't change, they can't fix? As a disabled person, as an amputee, at that point only, 10 years into these shoes, that really lit up to me as this very potent zone. So it was that was the itch that I was trying to scratch. The mortality piece was in there too, but it was a bit player. But sorry, that's a little prologue. So then when I finally finished my fellowship in 2007, and I went and worked at UCSF and was doing academic palliative care, at a big regional medical center kind of thing, I got more and more in tune with the end of life, the period at the end, and how death, how an endpoint can really shape how someone feels about the rest of their life. It was a way for things to come to account. It was a way to make peace, no matter what the person's experience had been throughout their life. There was something about a decent ending that could make sense of the hardest life. And I just really loved seeing that. And it was also clear by then, having worked in the hospital system, just how poorly we handled the end of life. So I was very much in touch with the need for energy in this direction. So I put all that together, and off I went into the hospice world.
Well, I think that the hospice and palliative care industry is a better place because you decided to pursue your your medical career.
Absolutely.
Well, that is nice to hear, guys. It's been such a gift for me personally. If it goes both ways, boy, that makes me happy.
I think we're better off because you have made such an impact in so many different areas. So were you involved in starting Zen Hospice?
No. It had been around since the late 1980s. I stepped in 2011, right when the guest house, the hospice house itself, had closed in 2004. There's a long history about so. Before I get distracted, let me just answer your question, Jerry. So no, the organization and the house had been around for a while before me, but it was reopening. The house had been closed, and it was just reopening when I took the job. So it's sort of something of a fresh start. But no, it had been around. It certainly preceded me.
Right. So Zen Hospice was a nonprofit. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Good. They're in San Francisco. That's very interesting. And even now, Zen Hospice has I think a reputation. You just mentioned it, and people are like, "Oh yes, we know about that."
Isn't that wild?
It really is.
Yeah.
Innovators, yes, innovative
exactly.
care, absolutely.
Yeah. It's wild to me. I mean, it was 6 beds. That little house was 6 beds, and I know I was attracted to it. I was among a zillion people attracted to it, and continue to be. The reputation of that place is remarkable. And I meet people from all over the world who have heard of that place. And it's also then telling and sad that the guest house had to close a few years ago. And we can talk about that. But I should say, I want to make sure that your audience knows, Zen Hospice Project, they did have to close the guest house, but that organization continues on. It's now called the Zen Caregiving Project. And it's run by a man named Roy Reamer, who preceded me and has been there a long time. He's a beautiful man, and they do great work. But instead of focusing on the house per se, they really now are focused on training volunteers and people to actually sit at the bedside. And honestly, that was its core competency. The house got a lot of attention, but that had always been the sort of prime driver of Zen Hospice, was this caregiver training program, of this way to bring people to the bedside. And that's what it's focused on now, is the Zen Caregiving Project. And they're still doing great work.
We have had the opportunity to speak to a couple of people who have been involved with Zen Hospice. Frank Ostaseski was one.
Right on. Yes. He was the founder. He was the first executive director.
Was he?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep.
And
he's an amazing guy. Yeah.
Yeah. He did some great work. So only 6 beds. And now they're focusing on caregiving. Let's stop and dig into that for a minute. When you think about the number of caregivers across the United States, unpaid, 54 million, somewhere in there, 55 million.
Something like that, give or take a million.
Yes.
Yeah.
And give or take a million. And with the anticipation, the expectation that that's only going to increase as this silver tsunami of baby boomers begins to make its entrance into healthcare and needing end-of-life care. There's such a need for caregiving education, good caregiving support, through volunteers, to create the community. Jessica Zitter is really focused on that caregiving need across the United States these days. So caregiving education, volunteering is so important. That work is so critical.
Oh, amen, it is. And relatively unsung. So there's a lot to do to shine light on this. Again, it's a huge 54 million Americans. I mean, that's what is that, a sixth of the population, something like a seventh of the population right there.
Yeah.
So that's just the people we know of. It depends how you define caregiving, and many of those 54 million are trying to hold down jobs. And, so we got a long way to go just to shed light on what's already happening, let alone, and support that beautiful work, let alone grow this piece. Because as you're pointing out, guys, the silver tsunami we're at the beginning of this, and we're barely meeting the demand now. So we got a lot of work to do. And one of the realizations among many is that we're never, even if every doctor, nurse out there wanted to go train in palliative care, we could never train enough professional clinicians to do all the work. And honestly, especially after my experience at Zen Hospice Project, I don't think we'd want to. There's something really gorgeous about the unpaid, the non-professional piece of this. There's something really exquisitely important about this. So many reasons to support this cadre of people and to grow it and to honor it and to develop it and support it and love it. I mean, this is some of the best parts of humanity playing out quietly in bedrooms all over the place.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Well, you can't talk about hospice without talking about caregiving support, because that is where traditional hospice care, the way we provide it here in the United States, according to the system we have, that's where it falls short. We so want you to have a good death in your home, but we're going to stop short of really, really providing robust support the way you would need it.
That's right.
We just can't.
And so that's right. I mean, the health system, we could talk for hours about its ills and its problems and its shortcomings, its limitations, and perhaps we should. The healthcare system, especially when it comes to trying to die well, is often as much a problem as it is a help. And that's a sad statement. But there's a lot of reasons for that. But all the more reason why we can't just say, oh, well, the professional guys, the clinicians have this. We, the public, just to get to hand ourselves over to the doctors and they'll take care of us through the end. That just can't happen. Doesn't happen, really.
Right. It doesn't happen.
Right. We're seeing these trends, the growth of the private caregivers, and then it's a silver tsunami, as we're calling it, that's happening. What other trends have you seen happen in the end-of-life industry over the past 15 years or so?
Well, one is this ongoing tussle trying to sort of engage the public around what is hospice, what is palliative care, some just basic awareness. And that remains, I think we've come far in the last 15 years, but I think we got a long ways to go. I mean, we know most people don't know what palliative care is. And if they have heard of it, they just think of it as the same thing as hospice or end-of-life care. And it's importantly different. So there's this sort of public awareness piece where we're all trying to engage this topic a little bit. And I think we've made some headway. I mean, that was the impulse to do a TED Talk. Get out of lecturing to fellow clinicians and get out and talk to the public and hear from the public. So I was surprised at how far that TED Talk went. But that tells us, that's one little piece of evidence that there's some thirst, there's some hunger around the subject among people to kind of get to look at this piece of life. So that feels encouraging. There's some motion in that direction. But I think the bigger answer to your question, at least from where I sit, is I, among many others, are starting to see, the healthcare system is important, but we're not going to wait around for the healthcare system to find religion on this piece. I think we don't have time. And frankly, this is a subject matter that belongs to all of us. No one owns death. This is a human endeavor. So engaging across sectors, across disciplines, if what we're going for here is something like quality of life, well, we all have something to say about that. And so do other disciplines like the arts or social sciences or architecture, blah, 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 on and on and on. So what I guess I'm getting at here is and there may be some wishful thinking in my comment here, but I also really believe it, that we are giving more success, pulling this subject out of the clutch of medicine. That death is not just a medical notion. They've been owning the subject for a long time, but it's really ours as human beings. So what you're starting to see is the market come into play here. Non-clinical organizations popping up to begin to address the subject matter, whether it's End Well or Reimagine or Jessica Zitter's films or Endgame, a movie I was involved in, or, I worked on a book with my partner, Shoshana Berger, who's not a clinician. There's all sorts of essentially piercing the veil or the boundary between the medical world and the rest of society. And that's kind of exciting. I'm very curious to see where that all goes.
I've been in hospice 12 years or so. And what I heard when I first became a hospice nurse are the same misunderstandings, misconceptions that I hear now. But I still hear them among healthcare providers, which I find very concerning. But we are so siloed. I know as a home health nurse, I did not know anything about end-of-life care, about hospice. If I had a patient on home health that looked as if they were needing that type of care, I wouldn't have known it. I never received any education about it.
Right.
So I think there's education that needs to be provided, although we're talking across to clinicians quite a bit, like you were saying. We talk to each other about what needs to be fixed. I think sometimes we're not having the right conversations about end-of-life care.
I agree with you. Do you have a sense of what you'd like to see from your point of view, to help this along?
I think in nursing school, back up. Upstream education. Don't wait until somebody's out in the field. I understand. I think nursing school is a lot like med school. You were talking about, you get your education and then you go out and you see real life. It's very different. Book learning is very different from what nursing actually looks like.
You bet.
And I think taking people like you, taking people like me, like Jerry, Jessica Zitter, Barbara Carnes, into the nursing curriculum that they're actually receiving. Let these nurses get information about end-of-life care. The other happy accident result of that is we're going to feed the industry with professionals that are already interested.
Right on.
Right. And that's a symptom of the pandemic, too. We're losing professionals that don't want to work in this industry at all anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and we should talk about that, how the pandemic is hitting this. I think there's some pros and cons happening, but I just want to echo what you're saying. I'm super with you. I think we have to drive these. These are fundamental principles. I mean, it's telling that you need a subspecialty like hospice and palliative medicine to come along and remind healthcare of these very basic things, like everybody dies. Suffering, is a human endeavor. We cause suffering in healthcare. Oh, families are important. Communications are important. I mean, this is basic stuff.
Right.
In some ways, this should be bread and butter healthcare. The idea that we need a little exotic subspecialty to talk about these issues is a little bit nuts and a little bit telling. This healthcare system is designed in a different way, let's just say. It's designed around diseases, not people, in a word. And it shows. So I think your point is really well taken. And it is happening. This is our point of encouragement. In my time around the block so far, I've been involved with more like at UCSF, watching the curriculum evolve at the School of Nursing and School of Medicine, watching these issues become introduced earlier in the educational process. That's very exciting. I'm seeing younger and younger people be interested in this field. When I was at Zen Hospice, we were seeing younger and younger people volunteer. So there's something shifting. There's something. We got a long way to go, but I am at least encouraged that the arrows seem to be in the right direction. And I'm with you. It's stunning, daily stunning how often I run into people who are clinicians who should know better, who don't know what the heck palliative care is, who don't really know what hospice. but the public seems to increasingly know. And what I get really excited about is when a patient themselves advocates for palliative care, doesn't wait or asks for hospice. That's really, that feels like a sea change. And I see a little bit more of that.
That's good to know, because we are in a situation, I think, now where we're going to need it more and more. We've already established that fact. And we need to get the information out there so that the public knows what that strange word palliative means. That's a word most people don't talk about in their daily life. I mean, we do. We use that word almost every day. But the general public, palliative just does not make any sense to them. They're like, what is that? So if we can get the information out there, that's what's going to be needed. Do you think more physicians need the training and the education about hospice and palliative care?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt, they need more education and training. It's a funny bunch. Doctors tend to have a lot of brain power, but we're also kind of arrogant, and it's hard to teach us things, especially if it's not coming from a fellow doctor. There's just it's a gnarly little culture in its way, and it's stubborn. And it's slow to change because it kind of feels like it's got a lock on. It knows the secrets of the universe. It's hard to tell a doctor things. I'm a doctor. I mean, this is, so I see it and I cop to it myself. So it's a funny bunch. They can do amazing work and they can really get in the way. So at some point, my money, honestly, guys, is on the next generation. It's kind of hard to teach some old timers this new way of thinking. We could hem and haw how it should have been different, but it hasn't been for so much of their career. And this stuff just is too much of a mind frame shift for people to wrap their head around. Also, part of that is the culture of medicine hasn't exactly encouraged doctors to take care of themselves or look at their own lives. And this is where this work gets really interesting and important and exquisite, is when you, the clinician, nurse, doctor, volunteer, are doing your homework to tend to your suffering, tend to your own mortality, think about your own existence. So the self-reflection seems to be a really key part of the education, and doctors don't take the time to do that very often, and certainly aren't encouraged to within the culture of medicine. So all the more reason to feel for doctors in a way, hope for some differences over time, but also to not wait for them.
Yeah. Right. I think the word that comes to me is advocacy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of us touched on that earlier. We have to learn to be advocates as patients, as caregivers. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm an advocate for quality end-of-life care. You are, mm-hmm. Jerry is, hundreds of people and professionals around the country. Yeah. But one of the things I have noticed, so my mom's generation, she's 89, right? Mm-hmm. If the doctor says it, it's absolute.
Right.
It's the culture. It's the time that she was brought up in. The doctor was all-knowing, and you never contradicted him or didn't do what he said. Mm-hmm. And so now I will tell her, if you want to change this, you don't have to do that. And you can tell that's such a foreign concept. Well, my doctor said this and this. I said, listen, the doctor is the quarterback on your team. You are the coach. Mm-hmm. You get to make the decision about what the team does. Right on. And it's like you're saying, it's a mind shift. It's definitely a resetting. And I agree with you. People bellyache about millennials. And I don't like that label. I think there's incredible awareness and consciousness and power and strength in that generation. I actually own 2 millennials. I have 2 kids, and I have nieces and nephews in that age group, and I think that's an amazing group of kids. I call them kids because I'm so much older. But these young people have a consciousness. I have conversations about hospice with my niece, and she's in her 20s. Yeah. And she's willing to have these conversations. So I think an upcoming generation of people who will move into these healthcare professional positions, I think that will make a lot of difference. I think they're coming to it with a different mindset.
I absolutely agree with you. And this gives me chills and gives me all sorts of hope, because it's not like it's such a different enterprise, especially once you're pretty fully baked as an adult, to kind of retrain your brain. And if you have that in your in your foundation right from the start, that being the idea, yeah, oh, we die. Yes. Oh, death is real. I think that if that's in your soup to begin with, you're gonna go much farther. Rather than in my time, I honestly, guys, it will look. I can't wait for the day when it looks just comical. Now it feels so sad or tragic. But the conversations I would have as a med student and be part of and be hearing from my attending presuppose that death was, first of all, an enemy, a failure, all those things, but optional. Like you'd have these conversations about whether death existed at all. And you're like, geez, Louise. I mean, so you got to spend hours convincing the doctor that death happens before you can get around to dealing with the realities and facing it. So, if you can start the conversation with death happens, it's just, you're going to go, it's just a much easier place to start.
Exactly.
And, so anyway, I'm with you. There's something going on with the younger generation. I don't pretend to totally understand their mindset. I'm in my 50s now, but what I see does encourage me. I do think there's something to be really excited about and hopeful about. So yeah, we'll see.
So while we're on this subject of the next generation,
Mm-hmm.
as you serve as a mentor to other physicians, obviously younger physicians too, what are the most important lessons that they can learn about end-of-life care?
Well, let's see here. I was just teaching a class at UCSF yesterday with med students. It was such a fascinating conversation. You guys would have loved it because it was very hopeful. But the thing that I found our conversation heading towards was the need to make sure that these guys, these young minds, big, fertile minds, that some of the habits and the momentum of previous generations of medical training, that they bring with their development a sort of skepticism to some degree. And by skepticism, I mean, really, I guess what I more mean is don't fall into the trap of thinking that becoming a good clinician, a good doctor, a good whatever, means abdicating yourself, means, that caring for others and caring for yourself must go together. The old way was don't care about yourself, care about others. It was either or. Like if you really care, don't leave the hospital, don't sleep. That's how you really care. No, don't do that as a trap. And also all the things to learn. So that's one. So just to be clear, that one big point is do not fall in the trap of giving yourself away. Your life as a human being is a huge piece of your education. And if you're doing this work well, it's going to be a fundamental to how you practice, not just what you learn from the experts in the books. I like this way of putting it, which is you can meet oncologists who know more about cancer than anybody else, right? They're the experts on cancer, but that is importantly different from being an expert of what it's like to live with cancer. Those are two very different things. So don't confuse those two. So it's a nod to deferring to your patients' wisdom and their families, et cetera. And it's also a nod to deferring to your inner wisdom as a fellow human being who suffers, who dies, who goes through difficult things. That's part of your education. Work from that place. So sorry to go on and on about that, but to me, that's a major, if we can really instill that in these guys right from the shoots, right out of the shoots, I think we're going to land in a different place. And we're also not going to burn out as quickly, et cetera. And we're going to give much more sensitive, subtle, nuanced kind of care. And we as clinicians will be feeding ourselves. So when we get sick, when we die, we'll be doing a little different ourselves. And I think that with this in place, we can get a little bit of a virtuous circle going. So that's, I think, for me, sort of number one. Does that make sense, guys? Am I talking sensibly here?
Absolutely.
Definitely. And a lot of it comes back to that self-awareness that we were talking about earlier too. Mm-hmm. Being able to look at yourself and understand, I'm mortal. I'm not going to stay on this planet forever.
That's right. And really know that in your bones, to the degree that any of us can. Really contemplate that, live that, see yourself in your patients, work that empathy muscle, including like helping you realize that you're going too someday. It's simple, but it causes so much havoc if you leap over that little fact.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, this is Jerry and Helen from the Heart of Hospice. We're about to start season 7 of the podcast, and we want to let you know there are some changes coming. First, the weekly Heartbeat episodes will be temporarily suspended.
That makes me sad.
I know.
But we will be publishing our longer episodes featuring industry experts every week beginning August 5th. You can be on the lookout for some fantastic guests and great topics. For instance, Rabbi Steve Leader will be with us to talk about how the death of his father changed his views on death and dying. And our friend, end-of-life educator Carol Schoenberg, will be with us discussing anticipatory grief.
Yes, and Jill Johnson-Young is back. She's going to discuss physical intimacy during serious illness and end of life. Author Anita Hannig will be talking with us about her new book on medical aid in dying. And board-certified hospice chaplain John Prescott talks with us about Zen Buddhist practices around death and dying. So be sure to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss a single episode. The Love Always Project is a grassroots movement created to encourage people to pre-plan and pay for their funeral as the ultimate act of love for those they will leave behind. Many people don't know they can plan their funeral in advance, but most people who do know they can pre-plan simply choose not to act on the opportunity. The Love Always Project knows there are benefits to completing funeral pre-planning, such as minimizing pain for your loved ones during what can be a difficult time of grief and mourning, and leaving a final connection with those you love that can mean so much. By promoting discussion about end-of-life issues and providing expert information, Love Always helps people design a better farewell. Funeral pre-planning and funding can reduce financial and emotional stress on your loved ones, giving them time to grieve, and giving you peace of mind knowing your wishes will be carried out. Follow the Love Always Project on Facebook and Instagram, and check out the Love Always Project forum page to find a space to share and learn about the many aspects of end-of-life issues. Visit lovealwaysproject.org to find the support and resources for funeral pre-planning that you need. So, what do you have on your wish list for end-of-life industry?
Well, I think we've touched on some of these things. Like one is, I hope that medical, nursing, social worker, chaplaincy, at least education continues to shift, continues to see these issues as fundamental, whether you're practicing ER medicine, hospice, whatever it is, that these are elemental. And I hope that continues to happen, the necessary piece of the puzzle. Another big hope would be that policymakers also get in tune with this sort of bigger idea of reality, and that healthcare policy begins to shift in ways that incentivize good care at the end of life rather than what it does now, which is essentially disincentivizes it.
Right.
So I hope there's a huge policy piece here. Then I think a third pillar for me is that the public continues to engage around this subject, see themselves in it, and that we all get over this impulse to think of death as something that happens to somebody else, that we begin to always see that we really start seeing ourselves in each other, and that we start realizing this human condition is all of ours to tend to. And on that note, I sure would love to see in society much trauma as we're living through right now, and as much discombobulation. I think it's time to kind of revisit the social contract. I've heard that phrase before. I don't know that any of us I don't know how we would define that right now. I'm not feeling that we're operating from a single social contract as people, as a society. I don't think we're there right now. And I think we need to get there. So in other words, the public, we as human beings have some work to do of looking in the mirror and understanding how much we need each other, and how caring for another is the same thing as caring for yourself. these sound like old-fashioned kind of, that's old-fashioned. Well, I'm an old-fashioned person. We need to revisit that. These are real truisms, no matter what age we're living in. So those things need to happen. And then the last pillar, I think, is this sort of infrastructure piece. I love, one of the reasons I joined Zen Hospice Project years ago is because of this sweet little Victorian house, this environment of care. As soon as we understand of care giving, care receiving as an experience, as dying as an experience, it's something that happens over time. It's affected by our environment, by one another, and that it's a really sensitive, malleable process that we can inform. It's dynamic. It's a living process. And nothing, for my money, drives that point home in a societal way is quite like bricks and mortar and infrastructure. When I go to a city, I'm in St. Louis right now, and you can tell this city really cares about Washington University. It's this beautiful university right smack in the middle of town. It's a lot of energy has gone into the feel of that campus. You look at it, something serious, important is going on in those buildings, and there's something about it being in the fabric of this community that tells us education is important. Similarly, if you imagine if every community had a hospice house smack dab in the middle of it that you drove by and it was gorgeous and someone had really paid a lot of attention to it, designed it and put energy into rather than run away from the subject, ran towards it, wow, I just think that kind of bricks and mortar, that infrastructure piece informs how we think, how we feel. And I know my guess is our own death anxieties would be mitigated if we knew we lived in a place that honored this time of life and you could see it in the fabric of the city. So I would love to see things like that happen. Public artworks and things like this that tended to just pointed ourselves to this fact. If you make it beautiful to look at, if you reward people to look in this direction, well, then things start happening. Then it pushes back on fear, and then you start getting creative, et cetera. So that's my sort of best, that would be my hope. Those sort of four pillars: education, policy, social, society, and infrastructure. Work on those things, infuse those things with our subject matter here, and I think we're living in a different world after a generation or so.
I love your philosophy with that.
He had me about having a hospice house in every town.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. I'm struck by the thought that, going back to school, right, in medical school, nursing school, everybody in nursing school goes through labor and delivery. Mm-hmm. But not everybody has a baby.
Right.
But everybody dies, and we don't get training on that.
Right.
So to have universal education and raise awareness across the board for clinicians, for humans, is what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. It's such a shared experience if we were to think about it that way and create places. You have hospitals that are dedicated to birthing rooms and birthing suites and things like that, but to have facilities, brick and mortar like that, hospice houses that are dedicated to that. Mm-hmm. What kind of awareness and what kind of connection would you make? That gives me goosebumps just thinking about that. That would be so awesome. Wouldn't that be
beautiful?
Yes.
Yeah. And it seems within reach. It seems like a smart thing to do, not just a symbolically beautiful thing to do.
Yes.
You want to drive down healthcare costs in your town? Have a good way to get off the Ferris wheel of the ER admit. Build a beautiful hospice house, build other infrastructures, help home care, do all, But one of the fascinating things about our subject, guys, is you guys know, we're making sort of moral, perhaps, and societal arguments and aesthetic arguments, but they're financial arguments. Everything's pointing this way. If you just bean counting, bean counting alone should point you to better care at the end of life and getting people out of the hospitals. So you got all these impulses pointing much the same direction. So that gives me a lot of hope. It makes me both frustrated, like, why aren't we farther down the road given all that? But it also gives me hope that we're going to get there, especially as we've been talking in the context of us swelling populations living with things that they can't fix or at the end of life. That's going to bring a mind shift just by the sheer tonnage of us living with these issues. This is not an abstraction. Every family is going to have someone living with a disability or chronic illness in them. And this is going to become less and less esoteric.
Right. It's not just about quality. It's also about quantity. You can quantify this.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's for sure. Well, let's talk about your latest project. mental health. So tell us about the mission of mental health.
Yeah. So thank you for asking. I love Sonia's my partner in this, and she and I, we just love our little baby. It's 2 years old now, and it is essentially, the one-liner, we have to work on this, but the basic, you guys will get, it's just basically, it's online palliative care counseling and coaching is essentially what mental health is. But you got to know what palliative care is to know what the heck I'm talking about there.
Right.
But we basically, at the start of the pandemic, Sonia and I our next chapter together, we were going to try to create a big open source library. We were tired or concerned about how people were left to sort of Google their diagnosis, and watching so many people go backwards with this flood of decontextualized information coming at them. And so we were going to try to work on that problem, create a library of curated resources that pulled from social science, medical science, the arts, all this stuff. I still love that idea, but then the pandemic hit, and a nonprofit library like that became sort of abstract and a hard thing to raise money for. And so we plucked out a piece of that dream, and we were calling it the Center for Dying and Living. We still have our little website. It's still sort of sitting on the shelf, but part of that mission, or part of that strategy, was going to have office hours. So talk to a social worker, call in and talk to a chaplain, call in, talk to a doctor, office hours. So pandemic hit, we decided, let's pluck that piece. The world needed direct support right now. Let's get right to the heart of matter with people. Let's offer a way that most people could access this kind of care. So that's where we put this office hours piece, turned that into its own little company called Metal Health, METTLE, metal being one's inner strength, one's own inner reserve. That's what we're trying to pluck in people. So that's what we did. We just hung our shingle with the rise of telehealth, and we pulled it out of the healthcare system. So this is a little piece of the puzzle, like we were talking earlier about how the world of the market and the world of commerce and innovation there's a lot of room to roll there. So for us, telehealth means that pretty much anybody can access it no matter where you are. It means that no matter if your health system offers palliative care or not, or you live in a community that has hospice or not, you can at least reach us on the video phone. And we created the model we let go of the medical piece. So I'm a physician, but to create our little model and make it as accessible as possible, we let go of the medical piece. So you don't need a referral. You don't need your insurance to reach out to us. Just give us a call, whether you're a caregiver, a friend, a patient. So that kind of access is what we've been trying to foment, try to generate. And that's the place we're working from. So anyway, sorry to go on and on and on, but there are little details in this model we can talk about, but that's essentially what mental health is: online counseling and coaching.
So if someone has a question then about palliative care, they can reach out to mental health and get their questions answered then. That's kind of the purpose of mental health?
Yeah. We thought it was going to be more like a hotline where people, it's 1 hour at a time, call up and talk to, there's me, there's a couple physicians, a couple nurses, a couple chaplains, a couple social workers. So we're all doing this sort of existential and spiritual framework, all the stuff that gets left out of your doctor's appointment. That's the stuff we're focusing on, the psychosocial and spiritual issues. And there's also the healthcare navigation. We essentially coach people how to use their existing doctor, their existing resources. We coach people what to ask their oncologist or the cardiologist, or how to hear what the cardiologist or oncologist, et cetera, are telling them. We're sort of patient navigators in a sense. We're advocates. I'm not becoming your doctor. I'm coaching you to use your doctor a little bit better. So people reach out to us. Most people reach out to us are actually caregivers, and then they'll bring their patient into the mix. But the caregivers are more than often than not reaching out to us, which has been fascinating. Mm-hmm. And something that couldn't happen when I had my palliative care clinic in the cancer center at UCSF. We talked about we care about family and caregivers, et cetera. But if you're a family member, you couldn't make an appointment to come see me by yourself. The billable person was the patient.
Right.
So that was sort of a promise that palliative care made that couldn't really make good on, but we can, because we changed the structure so anyone can reach us. So people reach out for grief support. People reach out for help navigating the healthcare system. People reach out for how to how to deal with the tension in the family. Maybe their person wants acute, intensive care, and someone in the family wants hospice. And how do you broker a truce? And then increasingly, what's been fascinating, guys, is people reaching out to us who aren't even sick, who are just going through some big transition in their life, this sort of existential piece, this meaning-making piece, which is my favorite. I love the existential stuff. And so we've got people reach out to us because they lost their job, or they want to get out of a toxic relationship, and they just need a safe place to be seen and heard and to think through some things. It's been so beautiful. It's just amazing. You create a little safe space and people show up and share such intimate things with us. It's so beautiful. So it's having this other effect where we're getting to depathologize the subject matter. You don't have to be sick to come see us. And that feels really cool.
Yes, I can imagine. So yeah. I'm just curious. I know for most people, they want to know, so how much is this going to cost? Is there any cost to it? And does insurance cover this? So what about some of those questions?
Yeah, it's really an important question. And admittedly, we're early on. So the way we started it was self-pay, so we could avoid the insurance and all this other stuff. Well, to make this work as a business at all, of course, money needs to flow somehow. So it is self-pay right now. It's $220 an hour. And that's a problem. We're trying to generate access. Well, not everyone can afford $220 an hour. So we're not going to stop here. It was the fastest way for us to hang our shingle and get ourselves out in the world. But increasingly, we're going to work on employer tracks. So employers will pay for this kind of work because they know, especially with caregivers, they know they're aware they've got some issues about employees are trying to be caregivers at home and they're burning out. So we believe there's a lot of argument to be made for employees paying for this service. And as healthcare moves from a fee-for-service to a value basis of care, there's going to be more money within the health system to pay for a social service like ours, a non-medical social service like ours. And we're starting to hear from payers of interest. So over time, we're going to have at least those three ways of paying for our services. In the meantime, I really want your audience to know we have never turned away anybody for financial reasons. So we have a sliding scale. So if someone really needs this kind of care and can't afford to pay much, well, we'll work with you. We'll figure something out. And in the meantime, we're also doing a lot of free stuff like monthly webinars that are free to the public. We just talk about what is hospice, what is palliative care, or caregiver support, or financial suffering, how that happens in healthcare. We pick a topic and we'll have a webinar on it and just host a big conversation with different experts or different peer people coming in. So there's something for everybody in there at this point, and we'll keep working on it to make sure there are other ways to get to us too.
That's great that you're reducing the barriers to getting the information.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. Yeah. A lot of communities, rural communities, underserved, we already know that's an issue. And
huge.
I'm a fan of the technology. As a hospice nurse, when the pandemic started and we went to all this, we pivoted to all this telehealth stuff, right? All this remote technology stuff. I thought that really just flies in the face of how we're supposed to be providing care one-to-one, human-to-human, and it really bothered me. But I'm also a fan of leveraging the technology that you have.
Yes.
Right? I FaceTime with my siblings during the pandemic when we were locked down because I can do that. I've got a smartphone. I can reach them that way. So I think there are a lot of advantages, and we should take advantage of using those things.
Amen. Right on. And I think we should also be, even as we embrace this technology, is not be overly seduced. It's never going to be the same thing as being in person. And I wouldn't want it to be, I think there's a beautiful hybrid thing that we're trying to cultivate so at Metal, we're trying to develop ourselves so that we're in touch with more folks on the ground. So if I have a client, say in Memphis or Texas, and then increasingly I might be in a position to say, well, you know what? On the ground in Laredo, we know of a great home health group, or we know of a particular Meals on Wheels, whatever it is. And we're going to continue to build our Rolodex so that we can use our sort of digital, place in the cloud to link people to actual folks on the ground. Because of course, the best care will be a hybrid of these things. There's going to be someone who needs to be in person. Touch is so magical, so important. There's something about the local community spirit. And so we don't pretend that digital stuff can do everything, but it can be a big enabler. It can be a big piece of the puzzle, especially if it respects its own boundaries. Like, I don't want to confuse telehealth with the in-person stuff. Those are importantly different, and I'm happy for those differences, but there's a place for both.
Right.
Absolutely. So if people want to find out more about mental health, where can they go? Is there an online presence there?
There is mettlhealth.com, METTLE, mettlhealth.com is our website. Come on over anytime. Okay. And then we're starting a little community piece. So we're also developing a little web-based community where people can talk to each other. That's happening. And then you can find us on Instagram. We're trying to get into that world too, at metal_health. We have an Instagram page. We have a Twitter page. So these are various ways you can find us. Yeah. Okay.
Good.
So before we close, we would be remiss, because this is my new obsession. I'm a book fan. So you have a book that you co-wrote with Shoshana Berger. It is called A Beginner's Guide to the End, Practical Advice for Living Life and Facing Death. And I will tell you, we've gone through a lot of books with this kind of stuff, guidebooks, experts writing, etc. This is one of the most comprehensive, and you know that word that I like, upstream, advocacy guidebook to doing all of this end-of-life stuff that I have ever read. It's awesome. It's practical. You hit it on the head. You say, look, warts and all, this is the system that we're working in. Here's how to make it work for you. Here's how to be personally responsible. I would recommend this to anybody.
Thank you.
Awesome.
That is so nice to hear.
Awesome
Thank
book.
you. Thank you. That was a labor of love. That took us about 4 years to get that thing up and out. Ooh-wee. I don't think I'll ever do that again, but I'm glad to have done it. And I'm really glad. If it's helping folks, that's its whole purpose. So I love hearing that from you. Thank you.
Well, we will have links in the show notes to Mental Health so that our listeners can connect with you there, with you and Sonia. And then we will have also links to where they can read about your book, get a copy of it for themselves. Make sure that our listeners can connect with everything that you're doing. We're so grateful to connect with you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. It's such a pleasure talking with you. This is a big, beautiful mission in life to share. And for all the challenges that we've laid out here, there's also so much beauty in it. And what a connecting force this work is among people. So I'm very grateful to be able to be connected with you guys. Thank you.
I love his attitude about younger people. The next generation, as he refers to them, there's hopefulness. Everybody knows where the flaws are in the healthcare system inside the United States, right? You can't be a healthcare provider or even a patient for 5 minutes without figuring out the system is messed up.
It's flawed.
It's huge. It's cumbersome. It's jacked in so many different ways. But what was the note that he ended on? He said, I feel hopeful.
Right. He sees the flaws, but he also sees that there's hope there for what can be and what we hope will be.
Yeah. He's a realistic optimist is what it comes down to.
That's right.
He sees what's going on. He realizes there are opportunities for improvement, but he also says, I'm willing to do the hard work, to lead, to teach, to research, to talk, to dialogue.
Yeah, he's one of those people who is a very deep thinker, but when he communicates his thoughts, they come out so simple and easy to understand.
Yeah, you're just sitting on the porch.
Right, but it's obvious
having a conversation.
It's obvious he's given a lot of consideration to the things that he's thinking about and what he's communicating to you. So the 4 pillars, I don't know that I can remember all 4 of those right offhand.
No, and I can't either. That's terrible. But he just managed to pull them together like that. His thinking is very methodical.
Right. Yeah. Of course, we keyed in on one, and that had to do with infrastructure. The buildings, having a hospice house in every city.
Dedicated.
Right. A dedicated hospice house in every city, because it brings people to this understanding. Eventually, we're all going to die.
And it doesn't have to be hidden away. You don't have to be isolated in ICU in an unfamiliar environment, and you don't have to be isolated and confined, and your caregiver confined to a very small living space inside your own home.
Right.
You could go to a place if we had more hospice houses like that, where this is what we do, and we see the great beauty in it, and we're going to walk alongside you, hold on to you until you're ready to let go.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
Yeah. What a great dream to have.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So we covered so many topics in this conversation.
We didn't even get into his book the way I would have wanted to.
I know.
I mean, the book is huge.
You have really fallen in love with this book.
I'm telling you, I'm a little obsessed. I go through this, right? But this is my current book obsession. It's called A Beginner's Guide to the End, Practical Advice for Living Life and Facing Death. Amazing content, clinical, estate, communication, relationships, spiritual, advanced care planning, caregiving, will writing, trusts, you name it.
Yeah, very comprehensive.
Very comprehensive. So impressive. I would definitely recommend this to end-of-life care providers, if you're a hospice professional. Also, if you are a patient or anticipate you will die.
Oh, well, that includes just about everybody then.
That is everybody. So there you go. There's a statistic in the book about how many people actually die a sudden accidental death. It's actually very low.
Really?
So the percentage of people who actually need a book like this is very high. It's a great percentage of the population.
Well, and here's what we know. We don't know who's going to die from an accident and who isn't. Are you going to be the one that dies from an accident, or are you going to be the one who dies from natural causes?
Exactly. So we would recommend that you go into Amazon, purchase your copy of A Beginner's Guide to the End by B.J. Miller and his co-writer, Shoshana Berger.
If you want to know more about mental health, we would also encourage you to go to their website, which is mettlhealth.com, and it's spelled METTLE, mettlhealth.com, and you can there find out what they are doing to improve the care continuum for palliative and hospice care patients.
So if you need to pursue their services, go in there, check it out. They have some very highly skilled counselors that work with the organization.
Right. Check out our show notes for links to mental health. Thanks for listening to The Heart of Hospice. I'm Jerry Fenter here with Helen Bauer. Because we know your hospice journey is 24/7, you can always find us at theheartofhospice.com. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening and leave a rating or a review on Apple Podcasts.
To connect with us, just send an email to host@theheartofhospice.com. You'll also find us on social media. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.